Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up is on page 84. Now, we kind of dove into this already last week, but I didn't get us through all of the 10th step promises. So I figured I'd back it on up and take another drive at it, but we're not going to bounce around nearly as much as we did last week. So where we're going to be picking up is on page 84, very bottom paragraph. Love and tolerance of others is our code. And man, if you were here last week, you know I was talking all about that love and tolerance. I got to lead with love, and that tolerance will follow. And so these are the 10th step promises. It says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, even whatever brings you to this all inclusive study. And what a powerful message of hope that is. The fight is over. On Fridays, Terry and I at the Lunacy Commission, we talk about, instead of getting into the ring with a gorilla or like Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali, we talk about like a very aggressive kangaroo. And it's like, we don't have to fight the aggressive kangaroo. The fight is over. I could not win. I could not win up against the illness that brings you to this all-inclusive study. I had no power. And so it's a wonderful thing that the fight is over. It's a wonderful thing that I don't need to fight anymore. We have ceased fighting. And if you've ever been in the rooms and maybe you said this, or maybe you felt, I'm really going to fight it this time. But what we emphasized and was re-emphasized and smashed home was that in and of myself, I cannot fight it. I've got no power against it. And it says, for by this time sanity will have returned. And the sanity that we are singularly talking about is that the obsession of the mind is removed. The obsession of the mind is the thought that I have when I am sober that tells me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll just go out for 3 drinks, or my problem is crack, but I can drink like a lady, or my problem is alcohol, but I can smoke crack like a lady. Some of y'all know I don't, yeah, pinkies up, but I don't do much like a lady. So what we're talking about is that thought is gone. And so if you are here and you've been relapsing, or you are here and you know what it's like to come back again and again and again, we are talking about freedom from that obsession of the first drink. That thought that takes me back again and again and again to the first drink, drug, hoot, hit, high, whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study. Also, bless you. So glad you're here. We're on the bottom of 84. It's the worst when I do it. When I catch people having a sneeze. Alrighty. So it says, we will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. So we're not going to bounce around this week. But last week we were on page 24. And on 24, it talks about how I cannot stop myself from touching the hot stove. I think this time will be different. I think the problem was the stove was hot in Calgary, but it'll be different in New York. Or the stove was hot and, the problem is electric stoves, but I can touch gas stoves. Or if you're feeling the way that I was feeling, you'd have to touch the stove too. And in step 1 on page 24, there is nothing in and of myself that I can do to stop myself from touching that hot stove. Now here on page 84, what has happened? I see the stove is hot and I do not want to touch it. I see it for what it is, and that is sanity. And how do I get that? You see, if I'm here today and I know what it is like to take that first drink or that first drug or engage in that first addictive behavior, whatever brings you to this study, and I know what it's like to do it again and again and again, and it's like, how do I get freedom from it? Well, what I've got to do is I've got to take the course of action that gets me from step 1 to step 10. That's what I've got to do. And what we're going to see, spoilers, all of these steps, or all of these promises that we break down, they got little caveats. They got little fine print, like the Apple terms and conditions. Now, I will say it's not, oh yeah, I did not update the schedule, and that schedule will not be getting updated by me. Whoopsies, didn't get around to it. Thank you, Maureen. But so what we're talking about is that this promise is going to come with fine print. It's going to come with terms and conditions. And the terms of conditions to receive the 10th-step promises is that I do the work in 4 through 9. And I continue that process in 10. And I grow it in 11, and I grow it in 12. That is the fine print. And I'm just telling us ahead of time, because you know me, I'm not going a whole tangent about how I didn't update the flyer in time. And I might forget my thought. It's been known to happen. And so we recoil from it as from a hot flame. I know it's hot. I don't want to touch it. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. And that's the miracle of it. And actually, I was going to talk about that in a bit. I always do that. I get too excited. But that's the thing, is when it happens to me, I know I didn't do it. You guys know what I'm saying? When you know that moment, you know in that moment where it's like the thought of drink is gone, and it's like some of you might know exactly when it happened, and some of you like might be looking in the rear view mirror. You're like, wait a minute, I hadn't had a thought or a desire or anything in weeks, and it's just happened to me. That, man, I didn't do it. Now, don't think that we don't got to do some things. I mean, a whole lot of action in this whole chapter into action. You're whole asking me. But all that is asked of me to do is 4 through 9, like my life depends on it, because it does. And continue that process in 10, 11, and 12 as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. But when I take that course of action, I change in ways I did not think possible. I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago, and a grand sponsee of mine, and at the time he was sitting on a 4th step, and he was sharing about, it's always going to be a struggle. It's always going to be a struggle. And I was like, and I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place, but it's one of those, yeah, you're on step 4. You've been sitting on step 4. And one of the most incredible things that has happened is that he finally got that 4 that he was sitting on done, but then dove into the 9th step and is going hard at that process. And you see, if I'm like, man, it is a struggle for me right now, I hear that. I acknowledge that, man. I want you to know that I care that it's hard for you. And what we will do is we will help you take the course of action that will allow you to be free in ways you never thought possible. And that's how I know this thing is experiential. Because I never thought freedom was available to somebody like me. And here it is. So it says, we will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. So I take a course of action that I don't like, that I don't believe in, that I do not think is going to help somebody like me, and I am changed. The thought to drink or the thought to drug or the thought to act out in whatever addictive behavior, it's gone. And I'm free. That's the miracle of it. We are not fighting it. Neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. And I want to talk about that for a minute. Because when we come to the 3rd step is ultimately a decision. I don't say just because it's a big one. You ever hear don't make any major decisions in your first year? Have y'all seen that 3rd step? That's a pretty big decision. Now, I'm just being a dink. But in the 3rd step, I am simply making a decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. And in so doing, if I follow that decision up with action, what will happen is my will and my life will be turned over to God's care. But you see, at the 3rd step, ultimately, what I'm doing is it's like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. I'm on this precipice, and I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know, really, if my will and my life will be cared for. It is a leap of faith. So if you're standing on that cliff and you're staring down the barrel of 4 through 9 and you're like, man, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if it'll help. I hear you. I hear you. It is a frightening proposition. These steps go against my normal nature. It is ego deflation at depth, and I would prefer to be inflated. Thank you very much. Not like a leaky air mattress. I don't want that. It's painful, but there's freedom on the other side. And so what I want to point out is that when we read this, when we read about being in a position of neutrality, being safe and protected, in fact, it goes on to say we have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. And the third step, I don't know if my will and my life will be cared for. I don't know. But here's the thing, when I get to the 10th step and I read these promises, more powerful than that is when I experience these promises. That becomes irrefutable evidence of God's care. In a position of neutrality, I am safe and protected. I haven't even sworn off. The problem is removed. That is irrefutable evidence of God's care for somebody like me. And that's what's available. But rudely enough, I've got to take the action to get the results, which is, I don't think that's how that should be, but it is. I got to do it to get the results. So it says, we feel as though we are placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. So this is not a theory. This is not a doctor saying, well, the patient appears to be neither cocky nor afraid. They seem to be in a position. No, this is our lived experience. And again, on Fridays, I do the study with my friend Terry, pew, pew. And we talk about, I stole it from him. He probably stole it from Babe. I'll give credit where credit's due. I don't know where Babe stole it from. But we talk about that this is a book of mirrors. And what I want to do is I want to hold up my lived experience to what is in this book. Does my experience match what's in this book? And as we were going through step 1, what we were seeing is that mirror. Man, do I drink like that or use like that or whatever brings you to the study? Is that my lived experience? And just as much as we can do that then, we can do that here. Is this my lived experience today? Because that is the lived experience of their first 100, and as y'all know, 80 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. But more than that, that becomes a lived experience of all of us who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That is our lived experience. It's not an idea. It's not a theory. It's not something that's nice to put on a doily or on one of Dell's inspirational t-shirts. If you came at the start of the meeting, before the start of the meeting, you would have seen his shirts. No, this is our experience. And this is a book of experiences. So again, if you're here today and you don't know if this thing could happen, what I want you to know is that it does. It does happen for people like us. In fact, if it didn't, we would be living in the hopelessness of step 1, which is to say to continue to relapse. So it says that is our experience. Now here is the fine print. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So that is how I react so long as the first criteria, because of where we're at in the book, is that we be at step 10 and actively working step 10. And as the result of that and continued actions, we're keeping in fit spiritual condition. Now, some of y'all know that I am not in fit physical condition. I am squishy. But there was a time in my life I did have abs. And y'all know my abs, they didn't lead to abstinence. I was ripped, but kept getting ripped. But to maintain a physical condition, that requires action. If I want to build my muscles, I need to take the initial effort to build them, and then I will need to continue to keep in fit physical condition by continuing to take the course of action. And you'll see that this is another example of the book meeting us where we're at and going to take us where we need to go. And I emphasize that because the book Alcoholics Anonymous does not expect perfection. It meets us in our fallibility, in our humanity, in, I won't say our flaws, because y'all are perfect, but I'm deeply flawed over here. So in my flaws, it'll meet me there. And I always think to myself, man, if the book can meet me here, is it not possible that God meets me here too? And both are going to take me where I need to go. And so here's where I need to go. It says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. You know what that means? It's easy to become complacent. It's easy to become complacent. And has that been our experience? And not you guys. You guys would never get off the spiritual beam at any point. That would just not be a thing that would happen to you guys. But hold on, I'll do that. Alrighty, sorry. So I know that you guys don't relate to that, but it is human. It is easy to let up. It is easy to become complacent. It is easy to fall into not doing it. You guys know what I'm saying? That is easy. And it's a well-known speaker by the name of Sandy Beach. He spoke about we all get off the path. And it's not about getting off the path. It's about how quickly we get back on. And so when it says it is easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels, what it is saying is it is easy to become complacent. Now, our laurels, I've been so busy and like really worn out. I forgot to grab. I made this little image. I don't know if Maureen has it. No pressure if you don't. It's of a little pillow and it's got a laurel wreath and the little. Nope, don't rest on your. You don't got it. I don't know if I'll be able to grab it, but a laurel is like literally in the like Greek Olympics, but way back in ancient Greece. The champions would be given this like crown that was made of leaves, a laurel wreath. And so when we talk about resting on our laurels, what we're talking about is to rest on our victory, to rest on our accomplishment. Now, it makes sense if we have been hustling our bustle, which is, of course, the technical term with which somebody enters the ninth step, hustling our bustle. It's easy to be like, look at all the work that I've done. Look how hard I've worked. I know my camera got frozen there. I saw that happen. I'm talking through it. Don't you worry. I just wanted to acknowledge. But it's easy. It's easy to rest on our laurels. And it's easy to rest on our accomplishments. It's going to say we are headed for trouble if we do. So complacency is a killer. And so this is the book going to meet us where we're at and take us where we go. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. And so this is a beautiful description of what it means to be recovered. Recovered does not mean cured. We are not cured of alcoholism. There will never be a time in my life when I can ever safely take a drink, or for somebody like me, any mind-altering substance, because I have the allergy of the body and we don't have anything to treat the allergy of the body except abstinence. But if you're like me, you know, yeah, but I can't do abstinence. Abstinence doesn't work for me. And that's because of the obsession of the mind. And when we talk about being a recovered alcoholic or a recovered addict or recovered, whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study, what we're talking about is the step 10 promises are alive and well in our life. The obsession to drink is gone as the result of this course of action. That is what it means to be a recovered alcoholic or a recovered addict. But just as I can never, ever safely take a drink or a drug ever again, is just as true as somebody like me. I cannot be safely not involved in the 12 steps as a way of life. There will never be a time where I have the luxury of complacency, the luxury of not doing all of this work. I don't have that luxury. And so that's what it means to be recovered but not cured. I will always have the allergy. And if I stop doing this work, the obsession will return and I will relapse. That's what it means we're not cured. And so we're not cured of alcoholism. So what do we have? What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And we're going to talk about that word reprieve. that word reprieve. So what we have is a daily reprieve. Now, I got a 1930s dictionary, and they got like a couple. I think Maureen's going to put some dictionary definitions in the chat. No pressure to do that, by the way. Just if you're doing that, you do you. Uh, but in my 1930s dictionary, the word reprieve, one of the definitions, and it's my favorite, so that's the one we're getting, suck it, is that it is a stay of execution. So a stay of execution. Imagine that you are on death row, and you're in that death row in those little cells. We get marched to the execution chamber, and we get all strapped in, and there is a little red phone. And as the clock, right before the clock strikes 12 or whatever time, the phone rings, and it's the governor saying, let's stop this execution. That is what a reprieve is, that we get a daily reprieve. So I get saved from a hopeless, doomed, fatal condition on a daily basis. We get that reprieve. And it is contingent, which is to say that reprieve is based on this, the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And I think there's something really important there. It is not based on my spiritual condition. It's based on the maintenance therein. It is, and so another way to say it, my sobriety is not contingent on how I feel. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. It is contingent on what I do. And I think, man, when we talk about this book, to know that a book is truly spiritual is a book that grows with the reader. And if you've been doing studies or you've been working with others, you guys know there is some big book fairies, little elves, little gnomes that keep putting things in the book. It's like, that wasn't in there before. And so that's another example of this book growing. But another is something that I'm going to talk about in a more general way, but is really prophetic to Bill Wilson's own experience. And what I'm talking about is that there are times in our spiritual journey, and I'm not talking about where we're complacent, we're not doing anything, and we're sitting on a 4-step or sitting on a men's, not sponsoring, and we're like, why am I miserable? I want to be very clear. That's not what I'm talking about ahead of time. But I'm talking about when we are on the spiritual journey and we're doing the deal and we feel disconnected and we feel that spiritual dryness, or we feel this something that is blocking us from God, and maybe we're not even sure what it is, and we're doing the inventory, we're doing the deal. Some people might call it the dark night of the soul. And Bill Wilson had many, many years of depression. And it's a reminder that my sobriety is not contingent on how I feel, but what I do. And another reason I talk about that is in the stages of human development, there was a psychiatrist, I believe, psychiatrist. There's a fancy brain smart person who studied children. And Jean Paget, I believe is the person's name. Did I butcher it? Yep. Absolutely I did. And this person discovered what was known as object permanence. And that at a certain age, I believe it's 9 months. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But there's a certain stage in the human development where, you know why peekaboo with babies is so like riveting? It's because when you're gone, they think you're gone. They don't like realize that things exist when you don't see them. So it's wild. That's also why it was like, they took the toy. It's like the toy is gone forever, you know? That's what we're talking about. And so object permanence is a part of physical maturity as we grow into childhood. That ability to see. Now, also, those of you who might have a little bit of the ADHD, you're also aware of object permanence, because if you put something away, you completely forget it exists. Maybe, how many bottles of ketchup did you buy because you forgot about it, something like that, right? So that's the thing. Now, it's also, just in my experience, a thing in the spiritual journey, that we can have that spiritual struggle with object permanence, where just because we're not feeling the immediate gratification or the immediate spiritual relief that we think we should feel, we think there must be no power. And I've seen that happen. And I've seen that happen with sponsees that I've worked with who have had powerful, incredible spiritual awakenings, but then stopped doing the work and then start getting a little crunchy and a little irritable and a little, why is it always God with you? What about me? And for me, whenever I'm thinking, what about me? It's like a hallmark that I'm wrapped up in the bondage of self. That's how I know I am in trouble. And so what happens as we continue 10 and 11 and 12 as a way of life, we develop, this is just my experience, spiritual object permanence, which is to say life can still be lifey and happening. And we might feel sad or grief or pain or loss or fear. And we know that there is still a power there. And that's what growing and maturing spiritually is often about. So I need to take the action regardless of how I feel. And that is so important. And then it goes on to say every day. Oh, no. You want me to do this on a day? It's Labor Day. I cannot be laboring on Labor Day. What do you mean? Nope. Every day. Every day is a day when we must. Oh, you guys, we should open a window. It's getting a little musty in here. Yeah, we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. So on a daily basis, what are we trying to do? On a daily basis, I'm trying to do what I think God would have me do on a daily basis. And that ties back to, again, that third step decision that I am willing to work for God. I am willing to work for a power beyond myself. I'm willing to trust that this power is going to do a better job than I am at running my life. Keep in mind, my life is a dumpster that is on fire when I am in charge of it. I mean, literally, you give me the reins just a little bit and I'm like, I want to die. That's not good. I'm pulling the plug on me. I should not be in charge of me. And welcome, we're on page 85. We're so glad you're here. So that is a tie-in to that third step decision where I'm willing to try another way. And on a daily basis, I need to attempt to access this power, to clear away the stuff between me and this power, to channel this power. It goes on to say, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Y'all know that's a prayer. Now, I call it the step 10 prayer because I think that's fun. Because I think it's fun talking about like a thing. Because where we're actually at in these paragraphs are really sort of bridging between 10 and 11. And if you were here last week or maybe even 2 weeks ago, we were really talking about the bridges between the 10th step and some of these other steps, and the bridges between step 10 and 11. And we're going to, depending on how I do for time, we're really going to dive in with that, talking about those bridges. So I call it the step 10 prayer because that's kind of where it is in the book. And step 11 has enough prayers. But I just want to point out, there's a prayer. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. And then it says, these are thoughts which must go with us constantly, so that we're working this on a constant basis. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. And as we get into step 11, a lot of the things I hear was meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s. It kind of did. It kind of did. Meditation is just bringing our thoughts to a certain point of attention, bringing our mind to a point of attention. And there was a meditative practice that was known, I'm going to butcher that pronunciation, hesychasm, where it's about mind focused in that mindfulness. Absolutely. But that was a meditative practice that was around for centuries, where it was about repeating a mantra. Now they had their own mantra, but that idea of really working, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. That's a prayer that I can bring into my day, that I can rock and roll with, that I can breathe with. Oh yeah, in your 1938 dictionary, to contemplate, to ponder, to tend, plan to dwell, thought, muse, reflect. And also in my experience, part of I enjoy, I'm kind of a weirdo. I really enjoy listening to the book Varieties of Religious Experience at the airport. It's kind of a thing. Just, I also don't mind the dentist, so I'm just throwing that out there. I know. And why I really enjoy that book is it's not about meditation. It's about spiritual awakening. But in it, he describes these people who had, in the Western tradition, meditative practices, which existed beyond well before the 1930s, so that's that rant. I'm a little like, because we often think I'm a little early for my meditation rant. I'm like, I gotta wait a couple paragraphs, but I'm on the tangent, can't get off. Am I on the beam? That's what matters, whether I'm on the tangent or not. Often we think discursive meditation is the only type of meditation, which is just thinking about things. But there was also cataphatic and apophatic meditation, which that cataphatic is like bringing our attention to something. And the apophatic is more that negation, so not thinking. So those did exist unknowingly. And all of that to say is, if gotta meditate. I was gonna say, if you're my sponsee, then I can give you crap about that. But if you're not, you get free reign to make your own decisions until we get to that point where it says prayer and meditation, at which point then we're all caught up. Alrighty. So it says, these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And an interesting thing happens at this point in the book and at this point in our journey. Because you'll notice in step 1, we emphasize, especially more about alcoholism, willpower does nothing against the first drink. Willpower cannot, under any circumstances, keep me sober. No matter how much I would like it to, no matter how much I need it to, willpower does not work. Except here, we're talking about willpower. So what is happening is we are aligning our will with God's will. Because make no bones about it, it takes willpower to write inventory you don't want to write. It takes willpower to make the amends you don't want to make. It takes willpower to practice this on a daily basis, to live this way of life. It takes willpower to pray. It takes willpower to meditate. It takes willpower to meet a sponsee when you don't want to. This course of action takes willpower. But when I do this, it aligns my will with God's will. And it says, so it goes on, and we're transitioning into step 11. It says, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. And that's the point of this book. To allow me to receive strength, inspiration, and direction from that which has all knowledge and power. And I don't know about you, I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge when I got here. I mean, I thought I did. I was full of, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. That's one of the worst things. You know how I know? Is because if I'm saying, yeah, I know, I don't really know, because I've been told it a bunch of times and I'm not taking action on it. I don't know, but I think I know. Held on to my old ideas, right? But I did not have knowledge, and I certainly had no power. So I was without, and when we talk about that conscious contact, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but that conscious is a with knowing, that with knowledge, that experiential knowledge. So I had no experience of this power, and now I'm beginning to have that experiential knowing and that experience of power. And if I do not have strength, inspiration, and direction, why would I not want to turn to that or who has strength, inspiration, and direction? Why would I not want to turn there? I need it. And the purpose of 4 through 9 and the purpose of continuing that process in 10 is to keep that channel clear so that it is God's strength, God's inspiration, and God's direction that can flow through. Now it says, if we have carefully followed directions, so we can ask ourselves, we can take this statement, turn it into the question, have I carefully followed directions? Well, if I'm not sure, I'll hold this experience up to my experience. Hold my experience up to the light of this book. It says, if we have begun to, if we've carefully followed directions, we have begun. So there's more possible. We're not done, but we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. Am I sensing that flow? Am I beginning to sense that flow? And if the answer is yes, awesome. And if the answer is no, it is not go and live in shame. We usually have a good idea of what it is we need to know. You know how I know? It's the thing that I'm avoiding. That's why. And actually, talking about meditation, the Oxford group, they really focused on two-way prayer. And there's this book that I really like. It's called The 8 Points of the Oxford Group. It wasn't regularly used by Bill or Bob or anything like that. It was actually out of Australia. It was an Australian Oxford Group member that wrote it. Yeah. And in it, he just describes so perfectly like the process. And he was talking about coming to this place of meditation, this expectancy and receptivity, where we're waiting for direction from a power. And he was talking about if you are blocked, what will happen is your thoughts will be on the things that you're blocked. So you'll be thinking about that resentment and that jerk that did you wrong, and you'll be afraid of all the stuff, or you'll have the amends that you're avoiding. You know what I mean? So it's like if I come to stillness, if that'll usually tell me. So again, if we are not feeling that connection, that's okay. It's just going to point us in a direction. Okay, what do I need to do? Well, it's carefully follow these directions. Make sure I've been fearless. Make sure I've been thorough. So it says we have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further. And here's the thing. There, at least in my experience, is not a glass ceiling on this thing. There's no limit to how much I get to grow, to how much I get to experience, to how much I get to seek. And that is incredible. Because at a certain point, there was a limit to how much I could drink because I would just black out. And there'd be a limit to how much I could smoke because I wouldn't be able to get any more, that sort of stuff. But there is no limit on the spiritual journey. And it says, and I will point out, but we must go further. I hope that window's going. Turn on a fan. It is musty in here. But we must go further, and that means more action. Oh man, it's almost as though this thing is titled Into Action. Expecting me to be all action-based over here. Action, action. So it says step 11 suggests. Now I will point out it is a suggestion, but we don't have alternatives. Well, we do. On page 25, we're given the alternative. Going to the bitter ends, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. That is plan B. And I know my camera did that thing again. I don't know why it's doing it. I can't fix it. Not while I'm doing this anyways. I just want to acknowledge that's happening in case you guys are like, oh, it's happening. I'm like, I know. It's weird watching me get frozen as you guys are moving. I know that too. It only happens for a second or two. Alrighty. So it suggests, we don't have alternatives other than alcoholic death, but it says suggest prayer and meditation. I read that as and or for a long time. You know what I mean? And or. I took that meditation as like, you don't really need to do that. And I'll tell you, my sobriety suffered for it. And when I work with people, to be honest, when I'm asking them about their spiritual disciplines, I don't even bother asking them about prayer. I only ask about meditation because I know if they're meditating, they're praying. I just know that. But here's the thing. I know if they're not meditating, they're like, well, I say the third step prayer every day. And it's like, no, that's not what I asked about. That's not what I asked about. What is your meditative practice? And that was my experience. I didn't do it, and I didn't have a regular practice. And so I just want to talk about that a little bit. And if you're here today and you're like, girl, could you not be calling me out? Rude, I'm sorry. That's on me. But how did I start a meditative practice? How can I get that moving? Well, here's my experience, because it's about consistency. So I need something that's going to work on a daily basis. Every day is a day when I must carry the vision of God's will for me and all my activities. Got to have an idea what that is. And if we're sitting on step 4, it's get your 4 step done. If we're sitting on 9, it's get your 9 done. You know what I mean? That's what it is. But I got to have that experience. So what how did I get into the practice of daily meditation? Well, I started small. I started small. I started with 3 minutes of meditation. Now, 3 minutes is too long for you. Go down to 1 minute, but do it daily. Do it daily. Use guided meditations if you want. Use a timer if you want. But here's my experience. Do it daily and make it short enough that you are able to do it on a daily basis. And then my experience and the experience of the people that I work with is it will grow. It will grow. But I've got to have consistency. I used to, many years ago, back in the era of abs, we are in my squishy era, but back in the abs era, I used to play rugby. And you don't have to know a whole lot about rugby, but there's a part in it where the game restarts with a scrum. And a scrum is where the strongest members on the field meet up and they try to push each other over the ball. I'm oversimplifying the explanation. Y'all don't need to know all the different positions, but my brain that does not work right immediately wants to info dump all of that information, and you don't need it. So I'm focusing. So one of the things is when I was in the scrum, we were taught if I'm trying to move something that feels immovable, which is the other women, the other 8 women on the other side, right? What do I need to do? Well, what I need to do is I need to decrease my stride length, so the length of the steps that I'm taking to try to push, and increase my frequency. And that is a really helpful suggestion for whenever we're feeling like there is an immovable mountain that I can't face. So I decrease the stride length. So 3 minutes of meditation and increase the frequency, making sure I'm doing it on a daily basis. And from there, it will grow. So it says we shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it in depth. It says better men than we are using it constantly. Again, this is not like a little add-on. This is how we are meant to move throughout the day. And here's the thing, it works. It works. There's a little very sneaky promise in that it works, that prayer works, that meditation works. But just like all the other promises, it comes with a caveat. Here is the caveat. Here is the fine print, the terms and conditions. If we have the proper attitude and work at it. That is what is asked of me. I've got to have the proper attitude, but more importantly, work at it. I can outwork a bad attitude, but honestly, it does help if we're, and here's the thing, you can show up with curiosity. You can run it. My former sponsor, she loved to talk about, I'm going to do it as an experiment. She was scientifically minded, you know? And so I can, it's just, am I willing to do it? Now, I will point out the proper attitude is that, like, imagine, I described the spiritual journey, and some of you guys have heard me do this talk, where the spiritual journey is a lot like Tinder, where it's like, you know, like step 2 is I'm just willing to swipe right. You're not catfishing me. And then we're building a relationship. Now, some of you that are in a relationship are going to know that your attitude matters. So if you like, imagine you're in a relationship and you show up with red roses, because that feels romantic. You guys, I'm not a romance person, but you show up with like red roses and you just slam them down and you're like, ah, let's go for a fancy dinner. And you just have that irritability the whole time. Does that sort of ingratiate itself to a lovely evening? No. So that's why I'm just pointing out that attitude. Am I willing? And that attitude can start with like, God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, I don't believe in you, or I'm struggling to believe in you. But I want to build a relationship and I'm willing to try. That's more than enough of a positive attitude, as long as I'm willing to work at it. So it says, it would be easy to be vague about this matter. So it'd be easy to be like, you should just go and do that. You should pray about it. By the way, how many times in my life have I been told by people in 12-step to pray about it? So many. But nobody told me how. How do I pray about it? You know what I mean? No one ever gave me that direction. They're like, you should meditate on that. What does that mean? Maybe you guys don't have literal brains and you're willing to like just figure it out on your own. I didn't know, and I wasn't going to ask because then I'm going to think you think that I'm stupid, and I can't have you thinking that. Gotta control that ego and image over there. So a lot of times, like I'll treat God as a vending machine. Get me this, get me this. I want this. I have a little thing of validation vending machine. I will take one validation, please. Whoop, validate me. Uh, and so that's not it. What is it? Is that idea of, I don't know what to do in your situation. I need your help and your guidance. I ask that you would take me out of the way and whatever your will is, flow through me. And how I can meditate on it is I can come to that place of stillness. I can bring my attention maybe to my breath, maybe to this moment, maybe to a felt sense of the presence of God, or maybe to just waiting to see if an answer comes. And what will happen is, and here's my experience too when we talk about prayer and meditation, where I see most commonly old ideas are in, I can't meditate. Because almost everyone, when I talk about meditation, they say, oh, I cannot meditate. My mind wanders. I can't do it. Yeah, I can't. I got some news. Everyone's mind wanders. You know the Dalai Lama? His mind wanders. The brain, I got some news, is an organ. Just like my lungs are an organ. And what is the job of my lungs? To breathe, to bring in oxygen, to breathe out carbon dioxide. So that's what they will do. And my heart is an organ and it will pump out blood. And my brain is an organ and it will think. Meditation is not sitting in perfect stillness. Thank goodness, nobody can do that. It is bringing our attention to a point. And then our mind inevitably wandering, us noticing and coming back to our breath or whatever the focus is. And there are times where, like it was spoken about in the 8 points of the Oxford group, that thing that I am distracted by can often tell me where I'm blocked and what I need to clean up, which is rude. So it's like it would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. So we're gonna make some suggestions and we're gonna make it clear and cut, and here's what we need to do. So it kicks off when we retire at night. Now, some of you guys might be like, all right, why are we starting at night? And I know it's kind of fun when people have like different, like genuinely like interesting sort of spiritual theories. Like you start day one, you come to the room and then the rooms, and then I don't know, like I've heard different things, but I'm just going to be real, like literal and boring. The reason it says when we retire at night is because it was originally a morning direction in the original manuscript. And the people that were editing it were the same ones that were like, yo, buddy, you got to soften that language and how it works. You take out that part about throwing the book away. You take that out. So the editors were like, that doesn't flow so well as a morning direction. So it was added as an evening direction when we retire at night. So what is the point of me going on that tangent? Well, there is one, despite whatever the lack of dopamine might tell you. The point of that tangent is that it does not matter when you do your evening review. For some of us, right before bed is not the best time to do the evening review because my brain, here's my experience. Now I do it pretty well right before bed, but I've built up that routine. It's not the best time to do it. But my brain, I have a cognitive collapse. It takes a whole lot of energy for my brain to function. And you guys might be like, are you sure? Because it's barely going. I know it's trying to keep all the threads and try to reel it back in. And at the end of the day, my brain is done. And so it's a little bit hard to do evening review at that time. I'm good at it, because not good at it. There's times are they my best evening reviews at 3 a.m. after I stayed up way too late scrolling on Facebook Reels? Absolutely not, but it gets done. I've done it. I've done it. It matters that I do it. That more than, being perfect. But here's the thing. I actually, I'll tell the story through the lens of I was working with a sponsee, and she was struggling with getting consistency with her evening reviews. And again, I approached through the lens of curiosity. So rather than you've got to do it, okay, well, what's the barrier? I'm sensing the resistance. I hear the resistance. What's going on? And the more we spoke about it, she described how she would come home at the end of the workday and just need to sit and stare at the wall. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So you're not going to do, and I'll talk about writing. You're not going to be doing writing at that hour. And I suggested, why don't you try either doing it in the morning or doing it during your lunch break? It doesn't really matter when you do it, as long as I'm doing it to have a look at the past 24 hours. We can do it once we get home. If you work out of the home, you can do it when you get home. You can do it after dinner, right before you unwind. You can pick a time that you do it, as long as you do it consistently. It does not have to be in the evening, and that sometimes makes it far more doable for a lot of people. So I point that out. Now, some of you, I spoke about writing it. Some of you might be like, hey, it doesn't say to write it. At no point does it say to put pen to paper. And I would say, yeah, you are correct. But this has been the power of demonstration in my life. See, when I was starting to apply the 11th step with the seriousness that it demands for somebody like me, there were people who had that light. They had that spark. They had that fire. Man, they were doing the deal. And I'll tell you, they were writing it down, which is, by the way, I want to be very clear. If you're somebody that doesn't write it down, I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'll tell you another story. I went to a recovery campout, and it was funny. I was doing my evening review. Somebody had brought a little lantern, and I was doing my evening review by lantern. And the mosquitoes were like, whoop, and so I'm doing that. And then there was a gentleman who came, and I will say, with the energy that unsolicited advice always comes with, where he shows up and he's like, did you know it actually doesn't say to write it? And I'm like, okay. And I just said, that's fine. But in my head, I'm like, buddy, you didn't even bring a tent. You're sleeping on your motorcycle and gonna hide it in the camp thing when it rains. Like, buddy, I'm not taking advice from somebody that didn't bring a tent to a camp out. No, thank you. And so that is what I call a demonstration. So again, if you are somebody that does the evening review in a meditative way, I am not saying that is wrong. In fact, a really interesting thing about evening review is Bill Wilson, essentially his sponsor, not Ebby Thatcher, but a gentleman by the name of Father Ed Dowling, who became Bill Wilson's spiritual advisor, was deeply interested in Alcoholics Anonymous, because because he was a Jesuit, and one of the other Jesuits was like, hey, this is a lot like the Ignatian spiritual exercises, which include meditative practices like Lectio Divina, and meditative practices like the Examen of Conscience, which is a meditative review of one's day. And Father Ed Dowling, actually, I got a little bit I don't have much time left, but Father Ed Dowling, he shows up in New York, and I'll just tell the story a little bit. It's a blustery, snowy day in New York, and Bill Wilson is homeless and living at the New York City clubhouse, and he's been dealing with drunks all day. When you have people that want your attention all day, and he's having that mental collapse, and he's sitting on the bed, and Lois is out, and one of the guys from the clubhouse goes, hey, I think he's a homeless guy. He wants to see you. And in that moment, when he doesn't want to do it, Bill Wilson says, okay, all right, send him in. And who shows up at Father Ed Dowling? The man that would essentially become Bill Wilson's sponsor. And Father Ed Dowling was like, do you know that this and the parallels between the Ignatian exercises? And Bill was like, no, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? And so if how you do evening review is pen to paper, amazing. If how you do it is a meditative practice, amazing. If how you do it is you use an app, amazing. I think what matters more is that we do it. And so again, I pen to paper because that was what was most helpful for me. And actually, we got 1 minute left. So why don't I just leave it there? We'll wrap up early because if I get into that next sentence, oh, we won't have time. So I'll stop the recording and we can wrap up with a prayer.